me your soul.
On this week's episode of Create, Consume, Repeat, I won't be talking about Disney's Pirates of the Caribbean. Instead, I'll be exploring H.P. Lovecraft's massive influence on horror, sci-fi, and pop culture. When you mention this master of imaginative fiction in mixed company, it usually conjures blank stares or an awkward laugh from fellow nerds that remember Reanimator.
Yes.
But these reactions have always bothered me, since H.P. Lovecraft is considered the father of modern terror, and his influence is far-reaching and entrenched in mainstream media. Just take, for example, At the Mountains of Madness, the story of a disastrous expedition to the Arctic in which a small advanced group discovers the remains of prehistoric life forms unknown to science, then is mysteriously wiped out, leaving the rest of the expeditionary team to discover an abandoned alien civilization built by the Elder Things, who first came to Earth shortly after the moon took form and built their cities with the help of Shoggoths, biological entities created to perform any task, assume any form, and reflect any thought, hinting that all earthly life evolved from cellular material left over from the creation of these Shoggoths. And if all of this sounds familiar, well, that's because it was used as the basis for films like The Thing, Alien, and Prometheus. Now keep in mind, this is just one of Lovecraft's stories, but the man was prolific. He gave us gems like the Necronomicon, which is now commonly associated with the Evil Dead franchise, and often seen making cameos alongside other cursed objects in various horror films and TV shows, basically transcending its literary roots to become a pop culture mainstay all its own. But what really made Lovecraft's work special was his affinity for the cosmos and what he called deep time, which in turn inspired him to create the Cthulhu Mythos, a shared universe filled with ancient gods, eldritch abominations, unfathomable horrors, and above all, an indifference and cruelty towards humanity that an existentialist like me could truly appreciate. This mythos would continue to grow in popularity since Lovecraft encouraged writers to borrow and build upon it. And even after his death, writers have continued to use elements in their own works. Proof can be seen in many of Stephen King and Neil Gaiman's novels, Clive Barker's Hellraiser series.
We have such sights to show you.
And even Joss Whedon's Cabin in the Woods.
What's beneath us?
The ancient ones, the gods that used to rule the earth. As long as they accept our sacrifice, they remain below.
And these are just a few examples off the top of my head, because the list really goes on and on and on. Hell, even music acts like Metallica and Die got in on the action. Yet even these examples only begin to scratch the surface of his impact on mainstream media, since his influence can also be seen in popular video games like the Half-Life series that borrow elements from Stephen King's The Mist, which is kind of Lovecraft inspired. And yes, Half-Life is just one example of a game developer borrowing from Lovecraft. Other developers have built whole games around Lovecraft's stories, chief among them Call of Cthulhu by Bethesda Software, arguably the best H.P. Lovecraft game to date. And this recent release of The Sinking City, I'll be reviewing on next week's episode, so stay tuned. And if all of this still hasn't convinced you, I present to you my fondest memory of Lovecraft's influence on pop culture, an episode of the Real Ghostbusters animated series titled The Collect Call of Cthulhu. This was a Saturday morning cartoon, man. That's crazy. Of course, these are just my opinions and observations, and maybe you know of a better book, movie, or game that illustrates his influence on pop culture. If so, I'd love to hear about it. So leave a comment in the section below, and don't forget to subscribe. And if you really like it, tell your friends.